The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. We want to thank you so much for joining us today on our webcast, How to Win a Government Contract. Before we get started, I want to go over a couple of housekeeping items. You'll be sent the PowerPoint deck and the recording within 48 hours, and we want to hear from you. So please put your questions and your comments into the console, and then we'll follow up with you immediately after the webcast. Also, throughout the webcast today, we have several polls, and we'll hope that you'll participate as our attendees find it very informative. They can see what people attending the webcast are thinking and what they're experiencing. I'm Kim Koster. I'm from Unanet, and we're privileged today to be joined by Christopher Polay from Capture2. So, Christopher, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Christopher Polay. I'm the founder and chief product officer at Capture2 Proposal, and really look forward to working with Unanet on this webinar.
All right, well, thank you, Christopher. On our agenda today, we're going to talk up front about the competitive landscape for government contractors through the results reported in the Gauge report. And I'll explain more about the Gauge report in a few minutes if you're not familiar with it. Then Christopher, he's going to go over 5 tips for winning a government contract. You know, there's so many details to master when you're becoming a successful government contractor, and sometimes you just need a firm grasp on the basics. And so I know that all of you are going to enjoy listening to Christopher's perspective. So with that, let's get started. So, wow. Look at the level of optimism we're seeing from our government contracting benchmarking survey. You know, it really runs throughout the entire marketplace. There's so much to be excited about in the GovCon world. So 70% of the respondents to the Gauge survey reported being optimistic. 18% were neutral, and only 12% were pessimistic. And keep in mind that this survey was being done during the longest government shutdown in history. So just think what those numbers might have been like had that not been going on in the background. So let me explain to you exactly what the Gauge is. The Gauge is a fact-based government benchmarking survey, and Unanet partners with CohnReznick to produce this report. And the result, we call it the Gauge report. We're now in our 3rd edition, so we have a lot of information that we're able to share with the marketplace. And the Gauge is broken down into 5 sections. And believe it or not, once we talk about those 5 sections, it'll spell Gauge. So we have government compliance, we talk about accounting, utilization, growth, and efficiencies. And also over here on the right, we have a lot of the information in the report broken down by revenue band. So you'll be able to look at data for companies, organizations that have the same amount of revenue that you do. Also, as you're looking to grow, let's say that you're $20 million today, you may be $40 million later, maybe next year you're projecting to be that high, then you'll be able to see what others are doing in that next revenue band to be successful. So you may be asking yourself, why do we do the report? So we do it really to give back to the market that we serve and the ones that we do business with. We also want to give our customers and prospects a tool to measure themselves and help make them more competitive, and that's really what we're going to be talking about today. And also to drive solutions to challenges we see in the report into our product and services. And keep in mind, you can grab a copy of the Gauge report. It's in PDF on unanet.com. So we ask, what's keeping you up at night? And a large majority of the respondents to the survey were managers and executives. So this is what really is top of mind for them. So the number one keeping executives up at night is competition for contracts. And you can see with the dark blue, I've got that circled, and then I've got the dark blue bar right here. That is the number 1 first ranking of what's keeping people up at night. So lots of new companies are coming into the marketplace right now because it's thriving, and so it's very important to win new business and keep the contracts and work that you currently have. So with the desire to be more competitive, there are challenges from a business development perspective that can be barriers. Now the biggest challenge, and that's been year over year, is the lack of BD funds and personnel. So what that means is that the money spent on capture really must be maximized. The second challenge is the lack of past performance. The third, followed by that, is the teaming partner, lack of a teaming partner, and then limited reporting tools. And Christopher is going to be talking about today and sharing with you how you can overcome those challenges. So this kicks off our first poll. And so we really do hope that you participate. So what are your biggest business development challenges today? Lack of BD funds and personnel, lack of past performance information, lack of a teaming partner, or limited reporting tools. So Christopher, I know everybody's dying to hear what you have to say. So what do you think that we'll see as the biggest business development challenges you're out in the marketplace? So what are you projecting that we're going to see from our attendees today?
Well, I'd probably always like to see, like, especially, given a majority of our segment of people that are on this call, on this webinar, fall within this, small and mid-size. It's always going to come down to BD funds and personnel. That probably, we're getting more constrained, always with BD, and we have to figure out the most effective ways of utilizing our limited resources and funds to attack the right business that we have the highest probability of win. So I picture that one being the top. The second one really coming into like past performance and ensuring that we have the right past performance to bid, which ties into teaming partners. And then overall, staying on top of it will probably come in. It's always last, but because people always think about the problem, not the solution. But it's having the reporting tools and the oversight to ensure you're making effective decisions with your BD resources and your BMP budget to go after work. So that's where I'm at.
I think that's going to be right on. So Jess, can you tell us what the results were?
Sure can, Tim. We were right on the mark. 56% was a lack of BD funds and personnel. 20% was lack of past performance information. 15% were lack of a teaming partner, and then just 9% of the limited reporting tools.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you everybody for responding. We appreciate that. So we also ask our respondents, what are your win rates? And we can see that win rates greater than 50% have gone up 5% from last year, okay? And last year what they actually were, if I combine the yellow and the silver here, it's 31. Last year that was 26. So that's great news that we're seeing increases in the win rates. So again, 31% of our respondents winning over 50% of the time. 37 were winning 26 to 50% of the time, and 32% are really still struggling a little bit, in my mind, winning 25% or less of the time. So I think there's still a lot of room for improvement. And that gets us to our second poll. So what is your win rate? So when you submit a bid, how often are you winning the contract? So A would be 0 to 25% of the time, B, 26 to 50% of the time, C, 51 to 75% of the time, and D, 76 to 100% of the time. And so, Christopher, you talk to a whole lot of folks within the GovCon industry, and what do you think the factors are that are actually making up the results that we're seeing of win rates?
Well, based on just, not just dealing with over hundreds of, companies that utilize our tool and meeting with their BD managers, but also, my personal experience of building defense tech companies from ground up, that the more mature that a company gets, they're going to have a more effective win rate. And that's the more mature that they get in their business development process, because they're learning how to properly evaluate opportunities so that they don't go and bid on them. The best thing you could do is walk away from an unqualified bid. If you can determine that an opportunity, early on during your pursuit, like even before during your pursuit, no pursuit decision, all the way even up to bid, it's walking away from opportunities that aren't worth your time because you haven't properly positioned. And usually that comes with companies that are a lot more mature. There also ends up being a downtick when a company is through a growth spurt, because usually in our industry, the federal contracting industry, primarily the founders end up being the ones that know how to hunt and win business, identify, hunt, win business. And then as they outgrow that, where they have to bring in more people, it's kind of holding their organization to that same standard and all the education and lessons learned. So we'll usually see an uptick of doing things correctly when they're smaller shops and that they're growing, and then a downtick as they hit a huge growth spurt, and then back up again because they've started really implementing the processes and the rigor and the proper evaluation of opportunities to eliminate opportunities early on so that they end up bidding on work and having a higher win rate. So I'm picturing that a majority of this group is going to be either at 26 to 50, to 51 to 75, and I'd probably say a majority of them is going to be 26, like 50. I mean, if there was a 45, like I'm really picturing like the 35 to 45%, but like I'll have to go with the 26 to 50. So that's my guess.
All right,
but I'm really feeling most of them are closer to 50.
All right, we'll find out from Jess here.
So we have 42% in the 0 to 25% range, 33% are in 26 to 50, 16% are in the 51 to 75%, and then 9% of you guys are rocking and rolling in the 76 to 100%. That's awesome.
All right.
Yeah, I want to meet with those companies.
Okay, so we also asked our respondents in the Gauge report what their biggest financial challenge was. And if we combine the number 1 and the number 2 ranking, and so that's the dark blue and the light blue, and I lassoed that, the organic growth around, I lassoed the red around the organic growth, you can see that organic growth really is the most challenging. And so if organizations are going to grow organically, you're going to have to obviously win more business, and in order to do that, you're going to need to closely understand your strength and differentiators in this marketplace. Now, in continuing to talk a little bit more about growth, we ask our respondents what the current growth rates were for 2019 and then what they were expecting in 2020. And so the chart on the left is 19 and the chart on the right is 2020. And I want to draw your eyes to the orange and the yellow parts of the chart. So if I look at growth rates, above 10%, in 2019, our respondents were expecting 59%. And if we look at where they're expecting to go, you can see a lot bigger yellow pie, just a little bit smaller in the orange, but we're looking at 72% thinking that they're going to grow more than 10%. So I really think that we're all expecting 2020 to just be an absolute banner year. Last thing, this will be our last poll. So what we want to know is what your projected growth is for 2020. Is it 25 to 50%, 10 to 24, 0 to 9, or less than 0? And based on the stability that we've seen in the marketplace, I think that we should see a strong overall growth rate. So, Christopher, I'm thinking that we're going to see the strongest in, just like we saw in the survey, between 10 and 24%. And if these are some small emerging companies that are on the phone, we may see the 25 to 50.
Yeah, I agree with that. I can see that. That sounds about right.
Okay. All right, Jess, so do you have the results?
I sure do, Kim. We have 25% are in that top band, the 25 to 50%. The big majority, as we kind of thought it might be, 58% were in the band between 10% and 24%. 15% of the attendees are between 0 and 9%, and 1% think that they'll have the growth of less than 1%.
Boy, I mean, that's awesome news. So, you know, GovCons it really is a great growth market right now for us all. So with that, Christopher, I'm going to turn it over for you to talk to the audience about the 5 tips to win a government contract.
All right, well, thank you, Kim. To start off, we understand that, you know, I can't tell you everything about how to win a government contract. And we all know, I mean, most of the people that are attending this call are, you know, they're mature in this industry, and there's a lot of different facets. So I wanted to focus on a few key elements that I think that are often put to the side that are extremely important, not only from identifying and winning contracts, but effectively utilizing your team, your business development resources, even the people you pull off delivery, anything you do to support going after capture efforts effectively. And the first thing is, you know, the pipeline. Now, we all manage our pipeline. You know, the majority of customers, you know, that we see, especially ones that transition to our product, they still use Excel, or they use a CRM solution that doesn't really work with our industry and our, you know, and how it is with opportunities, you know, given that we have long runways. But the fact is, you always end up coming down and managing your pipeline, and you should be actively conducting pipeline reviews. And this is the worst thing, and I could tell you, like in my own experience, I have been the biggest culprit of this. And it's very hard, especially for those that are on this call that are, you know, founders of federal companies or mid-sized companies, federal contracting companies that, you know, they're busy. Everyone's super busy when you're going through that. But in that you end up wasting a lot of time and cycles on opportunities that having oversight and, having collective meetings to review can help you identify and eliminate them as soon as possible. And that ends up, effectively utilizing your resources. So I always like to push that you need to stand strong. And even though if there's a BD guy, any BD or capture person on this call is going to tell you that like they're, pipeline meetings are sometimes they're just like, do I really have to do this? But the fact is you do, because if you want to work as a team and, and effectively utilize your resources to position for work, sharing information is key. And sharing real-time information is even more key, which brings us into the second point. Updating your pipeline regularly is critical. Now a tool like ours, of course, we update pipelines from our analysts to update opportunities. We have updates that come in from the government, but the key component is, getting updates from your capture managers. All right. Now we all know that it takes around 18 months to really position for any, decent opportunity and do all your work. Right, and a lot can happen in 18 months. You can go through BD guys, you can see a handoff. People change roles. Also, you just have people that just aren't real hunters, and you gotta, those that are really not doing their job, which is a sad part, but it does happen. And this becomes an effective tool because you see all the updates that are coming in from their opportunity updates. So if they go and they meet with the contracting officer, the KO, that information is instantly updated where you can view a live report of that. And so that way you're always seeing near real-time information, not just from a market intelligence perspective and, and our analysts, but also from, specifically your team and, hopefully your capture business development leads that are running that op. The other thing I'd go into is, like when we talk about, I mentioned this earlier on, is that, this seeing your pipeline regularly, forces follow-up actions, which are key. Like, okay, so you haven't been in there to see the customer. Have you actually been in there and met anybody on the tab? Like these type of things, they drive people to, they drive people to actually do actions that are essential to positioning for a win. And so, between oversight, but also holding yourself accountable. But it's not just meant for that, but it's also to share and exchange information with other business developers that are on your team or resources within your company that have connections or relationships that might help you, get closer to the customer, get in there, or, leverage past performance from what another division has done that's applicable. Communication is key, and this helps facilitate that. But to end, have scheduled meetings, use it as a means. Business development is the medium for federal contracting, period. This meeting, should be the most important meeting that you do weekly. Now I'm going to go into, so we talked about these opportunities and looking and reviewing. Let's talk about evaluating opportunities. So I'm going to go to the next slide. And we talk about your PWin. So I'm sure many people here are familiar with probability win modeling. And, to go through and highlight, a few key components of it. Now, in our tool, we do a rolling probability win modeling. And that means that as you're going through your capture process, you can see up here, that you're continuously updating your areas. Now, of course, these scores are pretty high, but that's just because it's a demo. So, everybody's PWin is completely altered. But as you go through in here, you're really continuously evaluating your opportunity and giving, a status update, really, on where you see your company, from a positioning standpoint in these areas. Now, as you run into that, you end up going to see, well, how do I improve that? Now, experienced business developers, these are things that they know, but some things are often forgot, like that. And also when you're building out and you're going through growth, having some rigor in this area is critical, because you will see as we talk later on, this becomes the foundation for comparing and contrasting opportunities that end up dropping at the same time, where you have limited resources in your pipeline. So when you go through the remediation approaches, they're providing you feedback, all right, based on industry standards and best practices, all right, and as well as videos, education forums, et cetera, that helps you focus on how to improve in particular areas using these standard practices. Now, as we go to the next slide, oops, sorry guys. Got a little crazy there. Okay, as we go to the next slide, we can see that the area right now, you can see that it offers a questionnaire. So based on this is just one section, And as you're going through and you're answering these questions, it ends up influencing your PWin. You also can put in comments on what influence, like, hey, now we have an incumbent on our team, or that we've determined that we actually have identified potential competitors, we're sure about them. All these things end up influencing your capture process. But as I said earlier, the end result, as you continue to go through this, listening to the remediation, executing the tasks for better positioning, these all end up rolling into your PWin, which is down here on the left, which then, as you have opportunities that might drop around the same time and you have limited resources allocated, that you can go through and determine which ones are the most efficient to pursue or no pursue. The other thing that's important that a lot of people, and I keep on stressing this, is that, way before when you do your pipeline review and you go back and you say to yourself, all right, we've been tracking this opportunity hard. We've had several interactions with the customer. All right, and clearly we've gone through, and the the PWin score compared to our other ops is super low because it's all comparative, right? And why is that? And that ends up being the flag to say, is this opportunity worth walking away? Does the customer truly desire competition? So like all those things that influence your evaluation of an opportunity, they're going to drive into your decision to walk away from an opportunity or to focus and to reallocate your resources on an opportunity that you're better positioned for. All right, so now we're going to go into tip 3, identifying and documenting key information in the capture process. All right, the first part of this, this is primarily geared towards small businesses. And the reason I wanted to call this out is, that the use of the small business advocate, we actually maintain the largest directory of small business advocates. We cross-reference them against the opportunities, because the majority of our customers, that they desire this capability. So that what happens when you're looking at opportunity, you evaluate the small business advocates, but a lot of people, what I've seen, have failed to use them as a method of gathering information. And they're the first step. If you're a small mid-size, the average contracting specialist has around 1.5 years of experience, and they continuously, sometimes knowing, sometimes unknowing, they don't really understand, like ensuring compliance to the FAR on how you can get face time with the customer. All right, like I've been on both sides where I've seen it where I've said, hey, I'd like to set up a meeting with the customer. I'm a small business. We believe we have capabilities. Here's a deck. And they said, well, we released an RFI a year ago, and we're not taking meetings until after the RFP is dropped. Now, in accordance to the FAR, that's BS. And this is common. I'm sure you guys have seen it. We even track statistics on what agencies are the most responsive, which ones aren't. And that a lot of times you're like, well, that doesn't seem right, that I should be able to get FaceTime. And that's the difference between a KO and a small business advocate. Now we have KOs, they're part of our data, like former KOs, they're part of our data analyst team and stuff. So we definitely get more of an insight to how their minds work and deal in their environment. But the biggest thing is that, they're slammed between, 30 to 40 props, 30 to 40 opportunities that they have to manage. It's not their mission really as much it is the small business advocate to help facilitate competition for a small business. While their job is still to facilitate competition, the small business advocate's job is to facilitate small business competition. So they become the primary, the primary conduit to getting FaceTime with the program manager or potential TEB members. And, to utilize them, people, I know that sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, but when we did an assessment on average, that the contract specialist, ended up 55% of the time getting our customers FaceTime with the customer, getting our market segment. So I think it's really important to leverage those. Now, one thing is getting in there so that, you get the meeting. And, I go and talk about obtaining and documenting capture information. This might seem like the most simplest thing, which it clearly is, but I always see that people, they go in and they meet with the KO, with the program manager, or the TEB, or the COTAR, and usually it's like some TEB member at that point, and they straight brain vomit. They're just like saying, hey, here's all our capabilities, here's all that we have to offer, and stuff like that. And I go through and I'm like, well, listen, your whole job is really to go in there and listen, because you have 2 objectives. All right, your first objective, and this is the primary one, is like, aside from budgeting, you can ask them the budget questions and stuff like that, but I just want to focus on the one that I feel is the most important, that people keep on like blowing by, because they put in their head, they think that they know what the customer's hot buttons are. You want the customer hot buttons to actually, the pain points to be heard. You want the customer to be the one that tells you that. All right, you don't want to assume anything. All right, so you need to go in there and you got to listen, and then you got to document it. All right, because there's two things that are important that come out of this conversation when it regards to pain points and hot buttons. One is you're getting insight, all right, to really sit there based on your interaction to say, does this customer truly want competition? All right, we run analytics on various agencies. I can tell you certain agencies that they will have a higher, like where the work is, pretty much 70% of the time, the work will go to the incumbent. Where other agencies, 50% of the time, the work will go to the incumbent. So there's definitely, this is very agency specific on how certain agencies work. Are they risk averse? Are they not? And that you can see in your conversation with the customer on what their pain points are, because as you're listening to them, you're going to see, and you're going to kind of figure out, like, do they really want competition? Because that's them telling you something. That's outside of the RFP. That's like them giving you their own, this is what, bugs me. And I can't stress enough, I continuously, even, managing several with 10 BD people, like, people just forget this one. And this really comes down to ensuring you're asking the question and ensuring that you're gathering and documenting the information, which all this ties into reporting. But you can't lose track on that, because it has, it really gives you insight if the customer wants competition or if it's worth walking away from the opportunity.
Okay, so the fourth tip we're going to talk about today is pricing yourself competitively. And so before Christopher talks about this in detail, I want to encourage you guys to be using external benchmarks like the gauge so that you can see what others are doing from an indirect rate and wrap rate perspective. So keep in mind that the management of indirect rates really can be the difference between whether or not you win or you lose a bid, whether you're making profit or whether you're able to grow your business. Now, you can get the chart and get it by revenue band. You can get it from downloading the gauge report at unanet.com. The example I'm showing today shows revenue up to 25 million, and you're able to see fringe, overhead contractor rate, government rates, material and subcontractor rates, as well as G&A, and really get an idea of what the range of rates and the percent of respondents are inside the revenue band. So it's really great data to have in your back pocket when you're producing a bid. This chart is also from the gauge report, and it shows wrap rates by revenue band. And so you can see the revenue bands there on the left side of the chart, and you can compare your wrap rate to those of others within the marketplace. And this will give you an indication of what your competition might well be bidding. And keep in mind, again, I said it earlier, but that if you're planning to grow your business, you can really get an indicator of what information data would look like if you changed revenue bands or you were planning to grow. So, Christopher, I'm going to give it back to you now.
Sorry, I was on mute. Let's talk about price to win. So in price to win development, there's various factors that come in. And the most important one, and which everybody's going to tell you, is first understanding the incumbent, right? We know budget goes into that to play, but the first thing is you have to understand what the incumbent's producing at. We usually know on recompetes, the service-based contracts, we always try to look at what the what's been POAM'd and put out, where the government's pretty much like allotted so much money. So of course they want to use up all their money. So that's an interesting, thing to consider, given our industry. But when it comes down to evaluating, you can see that in this one example, in that we see that it was awarded 47 million, but it exceeded ceiling to 65 million. And through this, you could go through and you can drill down on all the modifications to the contracts. Now, we've done our best to actually translate particular codes to tell you whether something is a supplemental agreement for work within scope or supplemental agreement outside of scope. And from that, you can understand what to eliminate from what actual mods to eliminate or to include when you're figuring out what the incumbent's actually performing at. Because any additional mod you want to cross-reference with the statement of work to see if that work was entailed in there or if the scope has changed between that and the follow-on. So this becomes a key component of understanding your pricing methodology. The second thing, and this is really unique that we released, we're actually the only company that does this period. For defense contracts that are over 7 million, that were awarded outside of contract vehicles, like, the ones that come out on like FBO or NICO or, those particular ops, that we've been collecting data on where the incumbent is executing the work by location. And this becomes a key facet, which is really actually a big game changer. And this was one of the biggest reasons we really want to do this webinar, because we knew we were going to have a lot of finance and price to win people on here. But that this breakdown allows us to go through, from a price to win perspective, allows me to go through and figure out where the work's being done. And we also know that by where the work's being done, we're going to have different rate structures for every location. Clearly, like an SME in California, subject matter expert in California is going to cost more than one in Arizona. So that's one factor. The other one is when you get vague requirements from the government that have a lot of and I use SMEs as an example for like training requirements, where you're trying to really get a complete understanding of what's the staffing, where's the work being done, and the government's trying to do their best. Hopefully, they're trying to do the best to give you that information, but they really don't have it in some cases. And this helps to come through. Well, they don't realize that they have that information. So we've gone through and brought that information up front so that you can know where the incumbent is actually executing the work by location. You can use this information to get a clearer picture and use this part of your price triangulation approach. But more importantly, you can use this also for rate blending when you have different locations and there's some vagueness and ambiguity in the requirements, but you still need to put a competitive pricing in there. So this is a big advantage that we've seen a lot of our price to win managers have really exploited this capability. All right, tip 5. So consider a teaming partner. Now, of course, our system manages, because we're a secure collaborative solution, and we wanted to make it as easy as possible to manage our teammate relationships at an opportunity level, as well as facilitate collaboration between the teammates for working on proposals and capture strategy, et cetera. So this is one thing after you have a team built, but what do you go through to get a team, to find that teammate to help build your team, to shore up your capabilities? And it really comes down to finding teaming partners that have the relevant past performance or relationship with the customer, all right, or a particular status that falls within your small business subcontracting requirements, depending on the size of it, of the opportunity. And so I go into talking about 2 different approaches for finding a teaming partner. Now, this one has been our most effective approach lately. We've seen a lot of customers that they've just came to us and said, hey, thanks, we were able to form a good team because we used your tool. And it was, I was like, great, that's awesome. And we were like, because it was built for that and that aspect, that we wanted to take it to the next level, like in this case, in this one example I'm showing you with analytics. So, in our analytic view for an incumbent opportunity, you can actually go in there and identify the subcontractors in a majority of especially in new contracts after 2008, because the government implemented, and we've seen a huge impact on this. In October 2018, they implemented the 52-204-10 clause, which required first-tier subcontractors to be reported. So, the prime contractor's contracting shop has to go in and report this information in accordance to the FAR and other subcontractors' performance. Now, this allows us, on our side, we link and associate so that you can click on a particular opportunity, view the analytics, but also view that subcontractor. So in this case of company X, we can see how much work that they've been allotted as a subcontractor, and you can go through and see all the different taskings that we've pulled from the systems. The one thing to notice here is that we give you the information that facilitates the introduction, right? So right now I know that this one, incumbent subcontractors received around 9.4% of total work share for the duration period of the contract. So we go and read, that gives them the tools where they can click on the contacts button, find that subcontractor's POCs and reach out to them. And now I would open up, usually if I was leading capture, against the entrenched incumbent, I'd open up saying, look, clearly you have established past performance and working on this op. You're receiving, 14% of the work share. I'm only showing 1 year, but let's just say, assume that's across the board. All right, would you be interested in coming to our team exclusively, and in return we give you 20% work share for your, and we get your past performance. This is a key factor in doing that. So, and this we're continuously seeing, because the more new contracts are released after 2018 with the clause, that we're seeing a huge uptick in the mandatory reporting required. So this is going to be a new avenue really to, identify who could potentially be on your team. That they have quals that are applicable, all right, and you have the means of reaching out and contacting them. Now, the second way is finding a teaming partner through alternative methods, right? Now, I put in this was just an example. I was looking at this one opportunity that was NAV4, formerly the SPAWAR, whatever we're naming it this week. All right, and from there we could go and see that the keywords that I put in this opportunity that I was currently looking for was risk management and command and control opportunity. So I just decided to do a search to say, go and tell me every contractor out there that's won a opportunity within a specific time range that was a total business set aside or small business work that was of these two types of contracts that had the risk management framework and command and control. And from this I got a result, and I could go through and I could view this. I got 60 results, and I go through and I can actually see the incumbent opportunity and that company and reach out to their POC information for potentially teaming as well. So it's an easy method, probably takes them around a minute, but it's very effective because a lot of the companies that, when you're looking especially for niche phrases, that these words, that if any of those words were contained within the scope or the PWS and all that, it's going to bring back that opportunity with that incumbent listed. And from there, you could go and reach out to them for potential teaming. So those are two ways of identifying that we see our customers continuously use for finding teammates. So that concludes my section.
All right. Well, thank you, Christopher. That was absolutely awesome information, and thank you everybody for joining. If you're interested in talking to either one of us, so Christopher about Capture2 or about winning new contracts, or if you want to talk about Unanet and the Gauge, please contact me. We'll answer your questions. I can see there's several within the console. And remember to look for your email in the next 48 hours, and you'll have this presentation as well as a recording of the webcast. And so we really thank you all for joining us.